I never expected to find myself at a pool party at this stage of my life. At 52, my idea of a good evening was a glass of wine and a good book on my patio, not splashing around in the sun with a crowd of people. But when my old friend, Karen, extended the invitation, something inside me hesitated to say no. "You need this," she had insisted over the phone. "You've been working too much. It's summer. Come, have some fun for once." I had laughed, shaking my head as I sat at my kitchen table, twirling the phone cord between my fingers. She wasn't wrong. Since my divorce 5 years ago, I had thrown myself into work, ignoring the empty spaces in my life. I kept telling myself I was happy, that I didn't need anything more. But the truth was, I had forgotten what it felt like to be truly present in a moment, to let go. So, against my usual instincts, I said yes. The day of the party, I stood in front of the mirror longer than I cared to admit. What does one wear to a pool party at 52? I had bought a simple black swimsuit, nothing flashy, just enough to make me feel comfortable. I threw a loose white cover up over it, slipped into some sandals, and with one last deep breath, I grabbed my sunglasses and keys. Karen's house was in a quiet, upscale neighborhood, the kind with manicured lawns and wide driveways. As I pulled up, I could already hear the distant sound of laughter, the soft beat of music pulsing from the backyard. My heart pounded a little faster. Was this a mistake? I shook off the doubt and stepped out of the car, walking toward the sound of the party. Karen greeted me with her usual warmth, pulling me into a tight hug before leading me through the house and into the backyard. The scene was almost surreal. Sunlight danced off the water, making the pool shimmer like something out of a magazine. People lounged on deck chairs, their drinks sweating in the heat. A few were already in the water, laughing, splashing. The smell of sunscreen and grilled food filled the air. And then I saw him. At first, he was just another face in the crowd, but something about him held my attention. He was tall, maybe a few years older than me, with an air of quiet confidence. He sat near the edge of the pool, watching the party with an easy smile, a glass of something amber-colored in his hand. He caught me looking. I turned away quickly, feeling a warm flush crawl up my neck. Karen, ever the matchmaker, noticed. "Oh, you have to meet Daniel," she said, nudging me with her elbow. "He's a friend of my husband's. Widowed a few years ago. Great guy. And might I add, very much single." I rolled my eyes. "Karen." "Nope. No arguments. You're meeting him." Before I could protest, she was already dragging me over. "Daniel, this is my dear friend, Emily. Emily, this is Daniel." He looked up at me with kind eyes, his smile slow and genuine. "It's a pleasure," he said, his voice deep and smooth. I felt my lips part in an automatic response. Likewise. The moment stretched a second too long, something unsaid passing between us. Then, just like that, Karen was off again, leaving us alone. Daniel gestured to the chair beside him. "Would you like to sit?" I hesitated, but then nodded, lowering myself onto the chair, smoothing out my covered up. "Karen can be a bit persistent," I said with a small smile. He chuckled. "That's one way to put it." The conversation came easily after that, like slipping into a warm current. We talked about everything and nothing: travel, books, our shared love for classic films. He had a way of listening that made me feel seen, like every word I said mattered. At some point, Karen's husband fired up the grill, and people started gathering around for food. Daniel and I followed, but even among the crowd, I felt that quiet pull between us. It wasn't until later, when the sun was starting to dip, and the sky burned in hues of pink and orange, that the real surprise came. I never expected to enjoy myself this much, I admitted, swirling the ice in my drink. Daniel watched me for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. Maybe it's time you started expecting more. I blinked at him. What do you mean? He leaned in slightly, his voice softer now. You deserve more than just going through the motions, Emily. Life isn't over just because we've lived a few decades of it. Something in my chest tightened. He was right. I had spent so long just existing, afraid to reach for anything more. But now, sitting here, looking into this man's eyes, I felt something shift. And I knew in that moment that this was only the beginning. The evening air had cooled slightly, but a comfortable warmth still lingered, carried by a light breeze that rustled through the palm trees in Karen's backyard. Laughter and conversation surrounded us, but I barely noticed. My mind was too preoccupied with Daniel's words. Maybe it's time you started expecting more. It had been years since anyone had said something like that to me, let alone made me feel it. Daniel must have sensed the shift in my mood because he gave me a knowing smile and stood, offering his hand. Come with me. I hesitated, glancing around. Where? You'll see. There was something both thrilling and terrifying about the way he said it. My old self, the one who thrived on predictability, wanted to say no. But something deeper, something restless inside me, made me reach for his hand. His fingers wrapped around mine, warm and firm, grounding me as he led me away from the gathering. We walked past the pool, down a small stone path that wound through the backyard and into a more secluded corner of the property. Karen's house sat on a slight hill, and from here the view stretched out into the darkening sky, the last remnants of daylight reflecting off the water in the distance. Daniel let go of my hand, settling onto a wooden bench, and I followed suit, the quiet between us thick with an unspoken energy. You seem surprised, he said after a moment, his voice softer now. I let out a small laugh. I guess I am. I didn't expect to connect with someone like this tonight. Like this? His eyes twinkled slightly. I sighed, shaking my head. I don't know. It's been a long time since I felt this present, since I wasn't thinking 10 steps ahead or worrying about what comes next. Daniel nodded as if he understood exactly what I meant. I used to be the same way. After my wife passed, I convinced myself I had already lived the best years of my life, that everything after was just. He waved a hand vaguely. Filler. But I was wrong. I studied him carefully. What changed? He exhaled slowly. I realized that closing yourself off doesn't stop time from moving forward. It just makes you miss the moments that are still yours to live. His words settled into me deeper than I expected. For years I had built walls around my heart, not out of bitterness, but out of fear. Fear of disappointment, of loss, of wanting something I couldn't have. But sitting here, next to Daniel, I felt something crack, like the first rays of light pushing through after a long, heavy storm. And then he did something that sent my heart racing. Slowly, carefully, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but it set my skin ablaze. I swallowed hard, forcing out a shaky laugh. You really don't hold back, do you? He grinned, dropping his hand, but not his gaze. I've learned that when something feels right, you don't question it too much. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't ready, that I had spent too many years convincing myself I didn't need this. But my body betrayed me. Instead of pulling away, I found myself leaning in just slightly, drawn toward the quiet certainty in his eyes. And then, Emily, there you are. Karen's voice cut through the moment like a knife. I jolted back, my breath catching as I turned to see her standing at the top of the path, hands on her hips. "I've been looking everywhere for you." She huffed, then paused, her gaze flicking between Daniel and me. A slow, knowing smirk spread across her face. "Am I interrupting something?" Daniel chuckled, standing. "Not at all. Just some friendly conversation." Karen raised an eyebrow but said nothing, her smirk deepening. I cleared my throat, feeling my face flush. "What's up?" "Just wanted to make sure you weren't sneaking off early," she said, folding her arms. "But now I see why you haven't." I rolled my eyes, but the corner of my mouth twitched. "You're impossible." "That's why you love me." Daniel turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Well, I suppose I should let you get back to your party duties." I hesitated. I didn't want to leave yet. Sensing it, he leaned in just slightly, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "This isn't over, Emily." A shiver ran down my spine. And as I followed Karen back toward the party, my heart was pounding in a way I hadn't felt in years. The party had started to wind down. The once lively pool now reflected only a handful of rippling lights from the patio. Karen was busy saying goodbye to guests, and I stood near the bar, absent-mindedly swirling the last of my wine in my glass. I had spent the last hour trying to pretend nothing had happened between Daniel and me, but my body refused to let it go. The warmth of his touch still lingered. The way his voice had wrapped around me, soft yet sure, replayed in my mind over and over. I wasn't just flattered, I was shaken. And yet I knew this feeling. It was the same one I had silenced too many times before, the part of me that still wanted, still needed, the part of me that had been asleep for far too long. Lost in thought? His voice sent a rush through me before I even turned around. Daniel stood a few feet away, hands casually tucked into his pockets, his dark eyes watching me with an intensity that made my breath hitch. I let out a slow breath, trying to compose myself. Something like that. He stepped closer, and I didn't move away. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said, voice low. I swallowed. "I'm thinking that it's been a long time since I've been in a moment like this, and I don't know what to do with it." Daniel nodded, considering my words. Then, as if deciding something for both of us, he extended his hand. "Then let's not overthink it. Come with me." I hesitated, glancing toward Karen, who was still busy with guests. The responsible part of me, the one who always put others first, wanted to stay, to make sure I had done my part as a friend. But another part of me, one that had been ignored for too long, wanted something else. I took his hand. Daniel led me back down the same winding path from earlier, away from the party, away from prying eyes. My heart pounded louder with every step. We reached a small, dimly lit patio at the back of the property, where the ocean breeze was stronger, the air cooler. He finally stopped, turning to face me. "Emily," he said, my name soft on his lips. "I know you're not the type to jump into things blindly, and I respect that." I held my breath, waiting. But I also know that sometimes life gives us moments we aren't supposed to ignore. A deep, aching vulnerability settled between us. I should have been scared. I should have run. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered, "And what if I don't know how to trust this moment?" His gaze locked onto mine, unwavering. "Then trust me." The wind carried the sound of distant waves, but I barely heard it over the sound of my own heartbeat. Then, with deliberate slowness, Daniel reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, just as he had before. But this time his fingers lingered, tracing a line down my jaw, over my shoulder, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. I didn't move. I couldn't. And then, just as gently, just as unhurried, he leaned in. I felt the warmth of his breath before our lips even touched. The moment stretched, a single heartbeat of hesitation, of possibility. Then I closed the distance. The kiss was soft at first, searching. But the moment I melted into it, it deepened, slow and consuming, unraveling something inside me I hadn't realized I was still holding on to. I clutched his shirt as if it were the only thing keeping me grounded. His hand slid to my waist, drawing me closer, and I let myself fall into it, into him. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking. I wasn't overanalyzing. I was just feeling. And it terrified me. I pulled back first, breathless. Daniel studied me, his thumb brushing lightly against my cheek. "Tell me what you're thinking now," he murmured. I let out a shaky laugh, pressing a hand to my chest. That I don't know the last time I felt this alive. He smiled, his hand settling warmly over mine. Then maybe we're exactly where we're supposed to be. And as I stood there, with the wind in my hair and Daniel's arms still around me, I realized something. For the first time in years, I didn't want to run. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of salt and night-blooming jasmine through the air. I could still feel the warmth of Daniel's hands on my skin, the lingering imprint of his lips on mine. But more than that, I felt something shifting deep inside me, something I couldn't ignore. I had spent so many years living cautiously, making the right choices, being dependable. And yet, standing there with Daniel, I felt a part of myself stirring awake, a part that longed to be seen, to be desired, to be more than just the sum of my responsibilities. He watched me carefully, waiting. "Emily," he said softly, "if this is too much." I shook my head before he could finish. "It's not that." "Then what?" I exhaled, searching for the right words. "I didn't expect this. I didn't come here